Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of More to Explore. Today, we are featuring the California condors, in which the Big Sur Condor Sanctuary Cam has been a little quiet this morning. So I'm just going to kick it over to a highlight where the full flock was there from just a few days ago. I'm excited to announce that we're kicking off a brand new series where we talk to different organizations and their policies on wildlife intervention. Starting with the Ventana Wildlife Society and their work with the California condors. And then after that, we have another update with Egg Watch. So it's a full show. Stick with us. So let's get to it. My name is Brian Bird, and joining me once again is the one and only Mike Fitz. Mike, good morning and happy almost Earth Day.
Yeah, that's right. And hello, everyone, no matter where you happen to be around the world. If you're new to Explode.org, welcome to the community. And of course, welcome back to all of our longtime viewers. We are the world's largest live nature cam network with about 190 live cameras all over the world. Brian and I are here with you live right now. So if you have comments, questions for us, drop those in the chats. We'll be looking for them during the broadcast today. And yeah, we're looking at the Big Sur condors right now. Tomorrow, we thought condors would be a great topic to discuss for this program because tomorrow is Earth Day, and it's more important than ever that we reevaluate our relationship with the planet. Western culture has too often viewed humans and nature as binary entities, and what I mean by that is humans and nature, in the minds of many people and many cultures, are separate and not equal, especially in Western culture. And so, through this reasoning, people gave themselves permission to exclude nature and non-human animals from their decisions, and we gave ourselves permission to ignore the consequences of our actions on nature. Now, however, we're faced with increasing biodiversity loss, extinction, and the impacts of human-driven climate change and other things. But the thing is, the health of the planet and the health of humanity are fully entwined. We need biodiversity. We need intact ecosystems and healthy oceans. We need condors as well. So as we look at, the Big Sur Condor Cam here, brought to us through Explore.org's partnership with the Ventana Wildlife Society, I think condors are a quintessential example of humanity's dysfunctional relationship with nature, as well as our ability to empathize with the needs of wildlife and find a way to give animals a second chance to survive alongside us. I consider the plight of condors as an example of human dysfunction because the near extinction of California condors in the 20th century was caused by human activities such as habitat loss, direct persecution, lead poisoning, DDT contamination, among other things. Their rescue from the brink of extinction, however, and their continued recovery is a sign of hope that we can find a better path forward. So today, for more to explore, as Brian mentioned, let's take a close look at California condors and how human intervention remains necessary for the recovery of this iconic species. To help us learn more, I spoke with Joe Burnett, who is the senior wildlife biologist and condor recovery program manager for the Ventana Wildlife Society. That is an organization that works to conserve native wildlife and their habitats through science, education, and collaboration. As Joe explains, human intervention remains necessary to aid the recovery of California condors. He also talks about the decision-making process that he and others utilize when a condor is in distress. This interview is part of a series with Explore.org's webcam partners about their wildlife intervention policies and philosophies. Here is our conversation. Joe, thanks once again for joining us on Explore.org. It's good to talk with you again.
Thanks for having me back, Mike. Always a pleasure to talk to you guys and give you an update on what's happening.
Yeah, condors have a long history of associated with intense conservation efforts. But let's maybe start at the beginning. What is the population status of California condors now, and what hazards do they face in their recovery? And I'm also kind of wondering, where are we, and how did we get to this point?
Yeah, great question. We're at just over 500 birds. We're at 566 birds in the world. 112 of those are in the wild in Central California. Those are birds that we collaboratively manage with Pinnacles National Park. So we've been doing that since, you mentioned earlier, since the late 90s. And just for reference, the condors, when they were brought in from the wild in the late 80s, in 1987, there were only 27 left in the world. So since that time, they've been captive breeding, at Los Angeles Zoo, San Diego Wildlife Park, now Oregon Zoo, and also the Peregrine Fund have been producing birds that we release out into the wild. So that, again, it's a huge collaboration of multiple partners that we work with. So the population has come quite a ways since then. And we now have not only wild flocks in Central California, but there was a new release site started up in Northern California, and of course, Southern California, and then Arizona, Utah. So yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride. In the beginning, we were learning a lot. In terms of, you mentioned the intervention level was much higher. Like any of these, when you're dealing with a highly endangered animal, I think the intervention correlates the level of intervention. Obviously, when you only have a few individuals left, you have to heighten that intervention to make sure you preserve the species that you're working with. And that actually kind of scales down as you get more birds represented, in the wild. The biggest challenge for condors, of course, the first one was getting the genetics represented. And so they strategically paired birds up in captivity. And luckily, we have a very strong genetic representation of the species, considering how much they bottlenecked at 27 individuals. So really fortunate there. So now the other part of the task is getting them back out in the wild. And, initially your methods are a lot more hands-on. But again, with condors, you want to keep them wild. So we have to limit it, the amount of intervention we do. So you're juggling different various aspects. It's definitely been challenging over the years. And, I've been fortunate to be there from the very beginning. And, here at Ventana, we pioneered a lot of different techniques. And again, our end goal is to not intervene at all with, any of these conservation projects, not only ours. The end goal is to not have to intervene. That's really where we want to go. That's probably the biggest goal. I know as most biologists, we look forward to the day where I don't see a condor with a tag on its wing. Although it's nice now to know which individual you're looking at, but really the end goal is to have a thriving wild population of, 1,000 condors.
And, we'll never, I don't think, ever know the answer to this question because we didn't perform this experiment, but might California condors be extinct today without the capture of the last remaining wild birds and captive breeding efforts in the 1980s? I mean, we could have gone that route, and I think there were people advocating for that, to not intervene at all.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah, they would have gone the way of the dodo bird for sure, 100%. And again, the cause of death, and still the leading cause of death for condors and all wild populations, is lead poisoning from ingestion of spent lead ammunition left behind in carcasses. And as an organization, we've spearheaded a non-lead ammunition-free giveaway program. So we work with hunters and ranchers to make sure they have the ammunition they need, the non-lead ammunition you need to basically get the lead off the landscape. And again, this isn't, hunters get to still hunt. And fortunately, the non-lead bullets are ballistically equal to, or if not better than, lead. So it's basically just helping educate. A lot of this stuff is sitting down with hunters and ranchers individually and explaining to them what our goal is, and that hunting is actually good, for the landscape for condors, as long as it doesn't have lead.
And your work with the Ventana Wildlife Society, is still heavily involved with condors. It's a hands-on process in a lot of different ways. So how does your organization's mission and philosophy and policies allow for something like intervention to help an individual condor?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we are the only private nonprofit releasing condors and managing a condor flock in California. So we work very closely and are permitted through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to conduct all of our endangered species work, which includes all the specialized training we received. And again, it's a permit for us to basically assist in their mission to get this endangered species delisted. We in Ventana's history, this first species we worked with before condors was bald eagles, and we were successful in assisting U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in restoring that species, and now they're thriving in the area. They're thriving in Central California now. So that was kind of the template we used going into the condor, and that's what brought Fish and Wildlife back to our table to ask us to assist with condors, was our success with bald eagles. And we've carried on a lot of those same methods, but again, you're talking about they are birds, but they're behaviorally very, very different birds, looking at, just having worked with both, really on a really intimate level, the behavior is dramatically different, and how you get a condor back out in the wild versus a bald eagle is very different. So we had a lot to learn with condors. It's a lot more intensive, a lot more hands-on. But fortunately, the trend has been moving to less intervention. From when they began nesting in Big Sur, we were concerned about potential eggshell thinning issues because condors feed on marine mammals. Marine mammals still carry some levels of DDT, so we were concerned and researched that early on when condors began nesting here on the coast. And luckily, we found out that we did have some issue, but not an issue to affect overall reproduction. So we dodged a bullet there, but we didn't dodge the lead poisoning issue. So, but again, those early phases of doing the nest research were pretty intensive. We were climbing in the nest, and anytime you disturb an animal in its wild setting, even for these condors that were released, they get wild pretty quickly. So we had to be very careful and very calculated about everything we do. And again, for folks to know, an intervention is a last ditch kind of option that we exercise. And again, it really depends on the situation. I would say it's almost case by case for condors because of depending on what's going on. Right now, we're a little looser with that. In intervening, we will let things kind of roll out, say on a nest cam, if things don't work out. Years past, we might have gone in and swapped out the egg, or gone in and saved the chick, but now we're a little less backed off. I think the best example of that was a Nico.
Yes.
That was probably our biggest, most popular. It's still going. A Nico is still thriving in the wild, of course, but I know with the Explorer viewers, they followed an Nico very closely from the time the fire happened until we evacuated her. And again, that was a special case, very case by case. She came out of a nest that was very important to the flock, and her whole story, we just wanted to make sure she got injured and knocked out of the nest. You guys have incredible footage of that we captured on your cams, that chronicled that whole thing, and from us rescuing her to her falling out of the nest. And luckily she ended up being okay and recovered at the zoo. We were able to re-release her, and she's out there right now. So again, just a testimony to how amazing these cams are, and really it brings anybody from around the world right into the condors world, and honestly the biologist world, how we're dealing with these different issues that come up. And again, the intervention is always kind of case by case these days, I would say, just to sum that up.
And you mentioned, you got to partner with different organizations to make it work, right? So you mentioned the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but there's other partnerships that are necessary to help individuals recover. So who else are you working with? Like if you need to take a condor out of the wild?
Yeah, it takes a village. So we work, so in that case for Nico, we had to work closely with Los Angeles Zoo. They have a captive breeding facility, but they can also take in sick or injured condors. And we also work closely with Oakland Zoo. They actually take in a lot of our lead sick birds, and they don't have a breeding facility, but they set up a facility just for helping us treat lead poison condors and other sick condors. And with the appearance of HPI, highly pathogenic avian influenza, that's also scaled things up. Oakland Zoo, we worked with them to actually build additional pens to house if we have an HPI outbreak, to help us on that front, as well as SPCA Monterey. So many partners, Oregon Zoo, all the partners that raise condors in captivity, as well as just local partners, state parks. We work very closely with California state parks. A lot of our condor nests are actually on state park properties right now on the coast, so we work very closely with their biologists. But again, it got the list of partners is long. Of course, as a nonprofit, we can't go without saying our donors and supporters are just as much of a partner as anybody. So it's it's the classic, you hear it all the time, but it takes a village. And anytime we deal with these condors, it's not just us. Thankfully, we have support from all directions.
And we were talking before we started recording the interview about the webcam viewers and how instrumental they have been. And I think some of the webcam viewers are very good at noticing signs of distress in individual condors, and that kind of leads into my next question. What protocols and behaviors are you looking for, like in a condor? So protocols for your organization, and behaviors in a condor that might help evaluate individuals in distress, and maybe what can somebody who's watching a webcam look for?
Yeah, and that's, I think when the cams first started with Explore, like any viewers, they came in and they were very interested. But like with anything with time, they become very experienced observers. And we've been able to get more into the weeds with them on the differences. They get to know individuals. Condors are very cool in that every individual is different. And, you can ask any of the Explorer viewers, they've gotten to know the individuals. We give them nicknames, similar to some of your other cams with the bears and stuff. And it really helps because the condors are individuals. They have a very complex social hierarchy. So individuals stand out. But back to the observations. So if you have a really dominant male that everyone knows about, say in this case, 209 Shadow, he's a pretty common sight on the Big Sur cam, dominant male. If you were to see that male suddenly pale, weak, getting beaten up by birds much lower in the hierarchy, that's a major red flag. That's most likely a condor suffering from lead poisoning. We haven't had a, knock on wood, H-Pi case in California yet, but we heard that the symptoms are very similar. So it's really condors being very social, and in a hierarchy, you don't want to show weakness no matter where you are in that hierarchy, because that means you're going to drop. And hierarchy is everything. It's whether you feed, who you breed with. So they will at all costs mask any weakness up until the end. So by the time we start seeing clinical symptoms, unfortunately, that bird is probably pretty severely, either poison or going, the injuries gotten really bad. And that puts it on us to intervene faster. And so, yeah, we've gotten tips from the Explorer viewers that they've seen a pattern developing with certain birds, and they're posting photos every day. And we go in and check at the end of the day, check out what everyone's posted on Explore. And we always tell them about it in our monthly condor chats. We always give a shout out to the Explorer. There's a handful of viewers, Explorer viewers, that just really hit the nail on the head and are really in tune with the birds now. And that has been huge. They've tipped us off to injuries, to poisonings, and we've been able to save birds as a result of that. So, I mean, it's a direct feedback loop right there, it doesn't get any better than that. And again, it took time. It took time for, like any of these animals you watch, you kind of got to learn how they tick. And it's pretty cool now to have these seasoned veterans watching the cams now, because they're picking up on stuff we might have missed, so I can't say enough about it. I mean, it's citizen science at its best. It's just a win-win for everyone. It's pretty incredible.
We don't get to see on the cameras all of what happens to like rehabilitate a bird, to bring them back up to a point where they're ready to return to the wild. At the San Simeon site, we get to see sort of like the release of many birds there. But I'm wondering about the protocols that are used to determine when an individual condor is ready to return to the wild. So let's say, I'm sure you could throw out many examples, but you mentioned an eco not that long ago. So what were you doing with an eco that helped you understand, hey, this bird is, she needed our help. Now, she's ready to go back to the wild.
Yeah, she's a great example. That was an unfortunate situation where the fire happened. She lost her dad in the fire. It was just the female redwood queen holding down the fort. And this male, like a lot of species, a dominant male was coming in trying to take over that territory. And in the process attacked an eco. I think it was trying to basically just take over the nest completely. Yeah, so an eco was dragged out of the nest, fell to the ground, had an obvious injury to her wing. We didn't know how severe it was, but if it was really bad, we knew we had to get her. So that was a situation where we knew we could access the spot. You have to look at human safety, of course. Is this a safe situation for us to put ourselves in? Is the nest on the side of a cliff? It wasn't. It was in a tree, at the base of a tree.
And a wildfire had just swept through.
And a wildfire had swept through. So it was a pretty dramatic, you know, we weren't actually, luckily it was the fires had just burned through that area. And it was, we were given the clearance by the fire officials to actually be able to go up in there, because that was another factor. If it was still too dangerous for us, they weren't going to let us go up there. And we wouldn't want to, obviously human safety is number one. Obviously we want to help the condors, but that was the main thing. So once we got clearance on that front, we were able to go up and grab her. And we didn't know the severity of the injury at the time. You have to treat it like worst case scenario. So when we got her out, even until the point we got her all the way to the zoo, which is for us, you know, we hiked her out, which took a few hours. Really steep, loose terrain after a fire. I mean, it was pretty treacherous getting out of there. And the crew and myself, we got Nico back to the truck, and then we had to drive 6 hours to LA Zoo from there. So it was a long day, and we finally get to LA Zoo, and that's when they were able to give her a full exam, and they determined that she didn't fracture her wing, which was really, really good news. That she had just, they get bone bruises, really bad muscle or bone bruises that heal on their own. And they said it would take a couple months for her to heal, but she was set up and the timing was good where she could get put in with the batch of release birds coming to San Simeon. And so they integrated her with those birds after she healed up. And again, they're keeping them away from humans the entire time. Believe it or not, even at LA Zoo, they have pens that are isolated enough to keep these birds in that wild state. And so, yeah, she came up with that next batch, and everyone got to watch her get, that triumphant re-release with the other San Simeon birds on the Explore Camp. So, I mean, that was kind of a full circle thing. We didn't get to see so much the treatment at LA Zoo, but that's, again, to protect the birds. We'd love to have a window in every stage of this, but those treatments are very sensitive. That's a more sensitive setup. So, yeah, but folks were able to see most of it, so it's pretty unique. I mean, we're excited to celebrate. And Nico's coming up on her 5th birthday at the end of the month on April 25th. So she is at 5 years old is when they hit breeding age. So we're really, really excited to see where she ends up breeding. Will she breed on the coast near where she fledged, or will she go inland to Pinnacles? So that's going to be coming the next few months in our condor chats. We're excited to update people. So yeah, that's just a classic. These birds are so long-lived. Condors live 40, 50 years in the wild. So they're long-lived individuals that we can follow. They live as long as we do. So it's you can't help but get so vested in some of these birds, especially in Nico. I mean, what a story of survival, So we just hope the best for her, and we keep an eye on her just like all the other birds. But now she's part of the flock, so she's earned her keep. She's carried on those traits of her father. R.I.P. 167 Kingpin. He was the leader of the flock when we lost him, but I think he passed on a lot of good stuff to her.
And I'm looking forward to following her story in subsequent years. There's a kind of it's not a new threat, but it's become more acute these days, and that's bird flu, or what something you hear called HPI, which correct me if I'm wrong, highly pathogenic avian influenza. So your intervention policies aren't always reactive; sometimes they're preemptive. So how has the Ventana Wildlife Society tried to ensure that bird flu doesn't decimate, an endangered bird like condors, where they are very social, they're going to be together, they're going to be, in places all the time, feeding on like a dead animal, where they can easily transmit disease to one another?
Yeah, you never know when these things are going to pop up, but it's always a possibility that disease threats come up. We encountered it 10 plus years ago with West Nile virus, and fortunately we had a vaccine available right away for the condors, and we trapped them all over a period of time, and we're able to get them all vaccinated. And now with HPI, the issue there wasn't a good vaccine. There was one vaccine available, but it had to be permitted by USDA, and we got a special permitted use for the California condor. So that was really unusual, but really important because of the event that happened out in Arizona, where 21 condors were lost in a very short period of time after they were exposed to bird flu to HPI. And that, of course, hit home with us, and we got in preparation mode and started putting things in motion. At SPCA Monterey, we set up, got some funding to set up 8 quarantine pens in case we had an outbreak here. We could start isolating birds and or put in sick birds to isolate them from the others. And of course, partnering with Oakland Zoo, we added 2 more pens up there, specially designed to treat H-pie birds. And again, anytime you treat a bird that's infected, you got to isolate it from from the rest of the flock. And even in treatment, you have to isolate it from the rest of the zoo because we don't want to threaten the zoo animals. It can obviously jump into different birds, and so that's the trick. It's kind of you're kind of holding, trying to control that quarantine factor. So now we're actually in process of doing vaccinations. We have vaccinated more than, we're in the process of doing vaccinations, and we have vaccinated 50% of the flock, and 70% of the flock have at least 1 shot. Similar to kind of when we all got our COVID shots, you got to get the initial shot and then a booster, and it's the same for this vaccine. They get the initial dose and they wait 30 days, and then we recapture them and give them the second dose. So fortunately, we're 50% of the way through, halfway through the Central California flock. Southern California is about 1/3 of the way through their flock. And again, trapping 112 birds that are ranging over 200 miles, across California is pretty daunting. But, we know it's one of those things we have to intervene and help until we get a better understanding what's going on with it. H-pie is just moving so fast. And when we had that scary situation out of Arizona, they could have lost way more birds. They could have lost their entire flock. And, it was horrible to lose 21 birds. But, if you look at it, half glass empty, half glass full, it could have been way worse. And so it was definitely a wake-up call for everyone. And not only our Condor project, but other wildlife projects. H-pie is for real. It's definitely decimating waterfowl. And it's hitting so fast and so hard that it's just hard to keep up with. So we're doing everything in our power to protect the birds.
And it sounds like your job is full of highs and lows. And I do want to ask you about the lows before we talk to you about the highs. But intervention doesn't always work, right? You try your best. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So what's it feel like? And how do you cope with those emotions when, hey, you tried your best and you worked so hard to save a bird, but it just didn't work out?
Yeah, I think the lead poisoning cases are the most heartbreaking, because we throw so many, people put just so much effort goes into saving them, and lead is just so brutal. It's so unforgiving, and there's just not medical technology to treat some of these birds when they're at the end. So it's the hardest part, and to the credit of the veterinarians and the zookeeper staff that have to deal with that on the front lines of it, dealing with those last moments with some of those condors, they take a hard hit, and they're innovating. They're definitely getting, from when we first started treating birds with lead to what we're doing now is completely different. We're getting much better results now, like anything, but it's just lead. I just reiterate to people how harsh lead is. It's a severe poison. It's like in humans, there's no acceptable level of lead. And the levels of lead we see in condors are just, for veterinarians and doctors they don't even know how to comprehend them. They're so high. So it's, they're just amazed the birds are so resilient to cope with what they do cope with. So we're learning a lot about condors, the role, not only the role in the ecosystem as being nature's cleanup crew, but it's also interesting how well they're able to cope with, some of these man-made poisons, despite the levels, but obviously we want to get that lead out of the environment. It's not good for condors. It's not good for raptors. It's not good for humans. It's bad to have in the food web. So there's no acceptable, for lead. We've gotten it out of gasoline. We've gotten it out of lead pipes and lead solder. Lead anywhere is just not good. If it's potentially going to become, especially as a hunter, if you're eating your own game and that sort of thing, you definitely want to double check on the lead stuff. And that's what I always tell. I grew up hunting back in Virginia, where I grew up, and what I learned from the condors, I wish I'd known back then, but I passed it along to my dad, and it made sense to him as well, so it's just, it's one of those things. Hunters are the first conservationists, and I'm confident that they will not only switch in California, but eventually I'm hoping across all 50 states we get this, non-lead bullets become the regular ammunition.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing, success in California and elsewhere because of those efforts. And again, that kind of leads into like the highs of your job. So what's it feel like to see a story of success after intervention?
Yeah, like a Nico. I mean, you can't beat it. It's just such an awesome story. And again, it just speaks to how resilient these birds are. I mean, she survived that fire. Who knows what she saw at the peak of those? We know we had images on the cam. That Explorer cam went right up until the flames hit the nest. And somehow those flames, that tree protected her. And it just really speaks to their relationship with redwoods and how important redwoods are to protecting condor nests. I mean, who would have ever thought? And just her whole story, what she went through, those trials and tribulations are amazing. And the fact that she's still here with us and now thriving is just that's the highest of highs for any of us out here working for the birds. And and it's always, but you do take your lumps, and it's part of it. We know when we get into this stuff, it's not going to always be, rainbows and unicorns. It's gonna have its hard times, and I think we stay connected as a crew and communicate. I make sure folks are sharing any if they're it's you obviously get disappointed when you lose a great bird, but looking at the end goal, the long game is really important, and making sure we stay on track for that.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Looking at the long game, do you foresee a day when frequent intervention is not necessary on behalf of condors?
Yeah, I mean, that's the end goal. And I do foresee that day. Obviously, it's going to take time. It's definitely time is the measure here. When you're changing hunter attitudes and getting folks to change behavior, it takes time. And, we know all of our data is abundantly clear. If we get let out of the environment, these birds will thrive. And with that means if we get past that, we do not have to tag them. We do not have to, we might periodically, if there's another H-Pi thing, might have to intervene on that level, but for the most part, it will be very little intervention moving forward. So that's pretty exciting, and I feel like we're on the cusp.
And a final question for you, Joe. What can people do to give condors a fighting chance to live their best life? You mentioned lead, and I think that's something that you want to talk about. So lead and other things.
Yeah, use non-lead bullets. It's that simple. And another great way to assist if you're not directly in California, if you're out of the condor range, do what our Explorer.org viewers are doing. Get on there and start watching the birds, and you might see something with a bird one day and post about it that really might save that bird's life. And again, the win-win, it's a win-win there, because you not only watch the birds, but you learn a lot about them, and you'll be really impressed with their intelligence and their social ability. I think it really blows people away. We always joke, we call them flying primates, just of how social and behaviorally complex they are. And you can't help but get sucked in watching on the cams and watching how these birds interact and watching birds grow up. I mean, we've had these cams going for 5+ years now, and it's pretty awesome to see that continuity. And again, yeah, and I think, just like anything, condors are sensitive to, anytime you go to these beautiful areas, make sure you don't leave litter behind. It only helps condors and helps, just the aesthetic, but it's just really important to all the wildlife. Just pack it in, pack it out. Just be an advocate, be an advocate for the birds.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to following the stories of the condors on Explore.org.
Yeah, we're hoping to get a nest cam going this year, so stay tuned. Still in the early stages, but those are some of the fan favorites. So we're going to try and get a nest cam this year, so stay tuned.
Sounds great. Thanks again to Joe Burnett, the senior wildlife biologist and condor recovery program manager for the Ventana Wildlife Society, for taking his time to share all of his expertise and insights about California condors, especially in regard to intervention policies. If you want to learn more about condors and the work that the Ventana Wildlife Society does for them, you can go to their website anytime. A lot of great info on there, including condor bios. That's ventanaws.org. explore.org. And of course, you can watch for condors anytime at explore.org/condors. Speaking of condor cams, Brian, we heard Joe mention the possibility of a condor nest cam, and that has become a reality.
Yeah, totally. We have the brand new Condor Nest Cam in Big Sur. And Mike, do you know who the resident is?
Yeah, there's a pair there that laid an egg earlier this year, but the egg did not survive to hatch. There's still a chance that the pair will have another egg in the nest before sort of like the window of this nesting season passes by. But the two birds here right now, they've claimed sort of like this nest high in the redwood tree is Kodama, number 646. Purple tags, you'll see number purple 46. That's the tag to look for there. So Kodama's a female. And then Vincent, number 892 with pink tags is the male. So look for pink tags and number 92 for Vincent. So yeah, they use this nest most recently. And again, there's a chance that they'll have another egg and we'll be able to watch that chick hatch and progress into a bird that fledges from this redwood tree. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a really pretty scene. Sometimes the cam might just like pan out to the ocean or something like that. It's right above. I think it looks like it's above Route 1 somewhere up on Big Sur. It's really a beautiful spot.
Yeah, it really is. Looking forward to it, and hopefully we do get another condor egg. But Mike, I believe we had a couple audience questions. If we can get to those before Egg Watch.
Yeah, we do. One of the questions came in during our interview from one of our moderators, actually, Oso Negro. I was wondering, could Ventana mention the collaboration with the native tribe on the restoration? Our interview that you just watched was recorded previously, so and I didn't have this a related question in there, but this is really in reference to the Yurok tribe. Further north in California than Big Sur, so looking up towards Northern California, I think this is the site, along with the Yurok tribe and the Redwood State National Parks, the latest restoration effort of condors to establish a new population further north. And in California, I mean, California is special for a lot of reasons, but you got redwood trees, which is as good of a reason as any to like California because redwood trees are amazing. But I think condors probably have a pretty special relationship with these long-lived trees because they provide such great nesting habitat for them. And if you're looking to provide wildlife habitat on your home property, if you can, or in your communities, make sure you're protecting old dead trees. That's one of the best things you can do to provide wildlife with habitat. So if you're doing that, it's in California, you know, if you can help old growth redwood trees survive, then that's going to help condors. If you're living elsewhere outside the condor range, if you just got a big old tree on your property, keep it there. It's one of the best things that you can do. And then Jen wrote in and asked, are the young condors, that is, still being tagged even with the population growth? And yes, they are. Earlier this winter, I don't know if they were able to tag them, but there were a couple of fledgling birds that showed up on the Big Sur cam, and they didn't have tags on them. And one of them, I think, was from a nest where they were. The Ventana Wildlife Society was surprised that this bird was even in existence. They try to keep tabs on all of the nests, and this was kind of like a secretive nest. So they will try to tag them all eventually in this population right now. But I think, again, as Joe was alluding to, the goal is to not have to interview. So maybe in the future, there would be just too many condors. And it'll become infeasible to tag them all. And we'll just be identifying them more easily based on their facial features and those characteristics and who they're palling around with. So good questions. Thanks for bringing those up. Glad that everyone enjoyed that interview with Joe. And Brian, for the rest of the show, though, not the rest of the show, but we do have a lot of nests to get to. So I think we're going to take us a few minutes to talk about what's going on our nest camps.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully, you know, the new condor nest can join us, but let's get to it for all the active nests. There's so much happening for Egg Watch.
So welcome to the April 21, 2025 edition of Egg Watch on explore.org. A lot has happened on our nest cams during the last 2 weeks. We have a lot of updates to share. course, eagles have been attracting the attention of a lot of people. The Trempealeau eagles, big changes there over the last week or so. All 3 eggs hatched. The most recent egg in that nest hatched on April 17. And if all goes well, we would, expect all of the birds to fledge in late June, I think. But there's been a lot of drama at this nest recently. One of the things going on is that the eaglets were struggling to cope with cold weather this morning. And it looks like one of the eaglets didn't survive that. At least that's what we can see from the webcam footage. And then the male on this territory, Mr. T, he's nicknamed, he's also he's provisioning another nest nearby, and that nest is visible on the cam too. So Mr. T's got a lot going on. Mrs. T's got a lot going on. The weather is affecting the nest right now. So a lot of people paying attention to what's going on there at the moment. And thanks to our partner, the Raptor Resource Project, for helping us bring these eagles to the world. We'll talk more about their cams a little bit later on in Egg Watch. But we got our Institute for Wildlife Studies nest cams out on the Santa Cruz Island in Channel Islands National Park. And I think some better news there going on. So instead of struggles that we're seeing, like at the Fraser Point nest, for instance, this year it looks like the birds are doing really, really well. So these eggs hatched in late March and looking for a mid-June fledge, I think, with these 2 birds. So looking good there, Fraser Point nest. And the Sauces nest, Santa Cruz Island, Jack and Audacity still raising their single eaglet that hatched on March 14 and looking for an early June fledge out there. And that bird is just getting really big. Giant feet there. I love how their feet get super huge before the rest of their bodies kind of grow into that. Moving on to a different species, though, Canada geese. A lot of activity happening. One nest that we were watching last week, there's 6 eggs in there hatched, and the goslings jumped from the nest on April 14. So this was a very dramatic event for us to see. And if you missed it, you can watch or get another opportunity to watch goslings jump from another abandoned eagle nest in the same area, also brought to us by the Raptor Resource Project. There are 5 eggs in this nest currently at MB2, and expected hatch is this week. So we're on hatch watch right now. There was a slim possibility that maybe the eggs would have hatched over the weekend, but I don't think that has happened yet. So we're looking for these eggs to hatch over the next few days or so. Moving on to peregrine falcons. Great Spirit Bluff. We have 4 eggs in that nest and expected hatch early May. So we still have a little bit of time for Elaine to incubate her eggs there. Castle Rock falcons on the Mississippi River downstream of Fountain City. With 4 eggs in that nest. Again, still incubating there. So early May, expected hatch at that area as well. Both of those cameras are brought to us by the Raptor Resource Project. And then to the East Coast now, to an urban habitat. Peregrine falcons are doing really well. Bow and Barb in downtown Baltimore, Maryland. They have 2 ISs in the nest right now. And that's just the term for peregrine falcon chicks. So hatch watch is happening at this moment for the remaining 2 eggs. So it may be a couple of days or longer for those other eggs because they weren't all laid at the same time. But yeah, this week, I think we can expect to see maybe those other 2 eggs hatching there, and expected fledge maybe late May for that group of birds. And thanks to the Chesapeake Conservancy for bringing us that cam. We do have a cam on Great Horned Owl Nest in Charlo, Montana. Hootie is the male there, and Wonky is the female. 2 owlets in the nest currently. And branching and leaving the nest by these owlets might begin in around 6 weeks of age. These birds hatched the first week of April. So we got a bit of time with them in the nest and in the trees there, thanks to the Owl Research Institute for partnering with us for this cam. Back to the East Coast, though, great blue herons with the Chesapeake Conservancy on the Delmarva Peninsula of Maryland. The herons nest in rookeries. So there's a lot of different breeding pairs in the same area up in the trees. And heron egg shells were found on the ground beneath the rookery recently. So hatching has started among the nests, although no hatching has yet been confirmed on the nest that we're watching on our camera. So we're going to have to watch for the behavior of the parents to really kind of tell us if there's little heron chicks in the nest, because we're looking up into the nest and don't have a great view down into that. But could be very soon for us to see heron chicks there. And speaking of wading birds, spoonbills and alligators, on that camera up in the trees above the alligators at the Alligator Farm Zoological Park, wading birds all over the place, in the trees, fledglings of different ages and sizes, chicks of different ages and sizes, still incubation going on there. So we're not watching a specific nest on that cam, but tons of different wading birds in the trees. And then finally, we want to introduce, and Brian, I'm really excited for this, to introduce everybody to the Stony Point penguins. There is a pair of penguins that we can see on this camera that has been incubating 1 or 2 eggs in just a little cavity underneath the rocks. And both male and females will incubate eggs in this species. These are African penguins, and they're a critically endangered species. So every little chick matters to the fate of this species. Incubation for African penguin eggs lasts about 38 days or so, according to the information that I've read. I don't know when the egg or the eggs were laid in this nest, because the earliest snapshot of the pair in the nest cavity that I can find is from March 18. So whether they had laid an egg at that time or not, I'm not sure. But if they had an egg in there on March 18, then we should be on hatch watch right now. So look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get a chick in the nest on this cam this week. But that'll be really cool to see, a little baby penguin for everybody to enjoy. So we'll be following these nests and other nests in the coming weeks, including osprey that are starting to show up at their nesting territories across much of northern North America. So be sure to go to explore.org anytime to watch the devotion of these birds and their eggs and offspring.
Awesome. Super, super exciting. And as well as all of the nest information, we do have more events coming up this week. Starting tomorrow, we have 2 events, starting with the AfriCam show, if you feel like going on a live virtual safari. And Mike, in celebration of Earth Day, you're actually hosting a live chat, right?
Yes. Yeah. Tomorrow, Elisa McCall from Polar Bears International is going to be joining me. We're probably going to touch on some bears. Just anytime Elisa and I get together, we always talk about bears. But really what we're going to be focusing on is our webcam partners at explore.org. So we have, I think, about 10 partners to feature videos from them about their work and what they're doing. We're going to talk to the audience about things that you can do to help the planet and keep our planet as wonderful as it is. So join us, tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time for that. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And then on Thursday, we have our Wild Moment show to see all the best clips from the AfriCam cameras. And then next week, we'll have our 3rd Eagle play-by-play. And if you missed the first 2, definitely go check those out. And thank you so much for sticking around with us. That is our show for today. And I want to give another special thank you to all of our camera operators and moderators that make the magic happen. And of course, my co-host, Mike Fitz. Join us again for more to explore on May 5th. And until then, happy exploring.